I entered my first ever game jam. 3 months ago, Inbound Shovel, the creative genius behind Isadora's Edge, announced they were hosting a game jam that was super friendly to newcomers. So during what was the busiest period at my normal job, I signed up and patiently waited for the theme.
The first ever Inbound Shovel Game Jam has officially started right now. You will have until July 20th to make a game that fits the theme, and the theme for this game jam is Just Get Started.
Unfortunately for me, the theme was revealed whilst I was halfway through my shift. So when I was on my break, I loaded up the game jam page and saw the video that announced the theme was just getting started. I spent the rest of my break writing notes on my phone about the direction I could go in, and eventually I settled on a small platformer game where every level you unlock a new movement ability for your character, and that I wanted to use just 3 colours, being black, white and blue. 3 days later, I finally had a day at work where I wasn't working late and was able to get started by making a vector art character for my game, and spent 2 hours trying to get it to the right scale and animate it before moving on to making the character controller, where a different movement ability would unlock as you progress through the levels. And that's where I left it for day 1. Day 2 went a little bit differently. Unfortunately, I got my work rota for the next week, including working a close on the day the game jam was due to end, which meant I would be at work for the last 8 hours of the jam, effectively cutting my remaining work time in half. So I needed to make a choice about the future of my game. So I decided the best thing to do for me to complete this game by the deadline was to scrap the idea of making my own vector art, and started looking for asset packs that I could use in the game that would still fit the dark, void-like aesthetic I had already decided on for my game. And I quickly came across the Shadow series by Escape. So I downloaded the tile map and the Obsidian Shadow sprite sheet and got to work on importing these assets and setting up the character animation to work with my existing moving script from the day before. With that now done, it was time to finally build the first level, so I imported the tile map and quickly noticed all of the tiles were not to the same scale and they were on a grey background, and unfortunately I didn't have Aseprite, so I tried to convert the tile map to pixel edit in order to try and fix these 2 issues. Yeah, the solution wasn't working the way I originally intended it. Like, my go around fix left the sprites feeling blurry and it just didn't look good. So I was forced into the only logical solution at this point, and that was to buy a license to Aseprite. So I guess at some point I'm going to be learning pixel art just so this investment goes somewhere at some point in the future. Let me know in the comments if that's a video you think would be interested of me just, learning how to do pixel art for, maybe a month just to see how my skills progress. After taking a quick break and relaxing just as a bit to get some food, I got the tile map working using Aseprite and started work on some backgrounds where I realised I forgot to resume the recording, which is okay because I didn't like the backgrounds that I did have, and instead I opted to load up Photoshop and just make a simple blue to black gradient that would represent a nice sky. With the first level now complete, I posted a short video in the Inbound Shovel Discord community just to get some feedback of the game, and the general response was the game seemed a bit too dark, and to be completely honest with you, I kind of agree. So I went back into Aseprite and I made my first ever pixel art sprite of the moon, which I would then add to the game and add a 2D light source to it, which would then be used to light up the scenes. At this time I also inserted a particle system into the game that would emit white squares that would be the stars in the night sky. And that's where we ended on day 1. Day 2 was now at an end as I was off to work, but I felt after the 2 days of working on this game I was pretty confident with where we were at and being able to meet the deadline, and we would I felt like at this point I would get the game uploaded on time. I had a game loop, the core mechanics were done, and there was just a little bit of polish to make it look good. And at this point it was time to head to bed. Unfortunately, like I said, summer for me in my job is the busy period. So day 3 we had just 2 days left before the deadline. I think it was a little over 48, I think it was like 50 something hours at this point, and I'd spent pretty much all of day 3 just working on making levels for the game and trying to get the levels completed. Obviously level 1 you could only move right, level 2 you could move left and right, and level 3 introduced the ability to jump. And I won't take you into too much detail of level 4 because there is a puzzle element to it, and I would rather people like look at it and, you know, try and figure out how they need to solve it. I also discovered a shortcut in one of the levels, but I'm choosing to leave it in just to see if anyone else can find it, and to my knowledge no one else has yet. It was at this point that I came up with the name First Steps for the game, because every level you're unlocking a new mechanic and taking your first steps with that new mechanic or movement. And looking back on this now 2 months later, I also feel this is appropriate because it's the first original game I've ever made, as well as being my first steps in game development. And I find it very interesting that how just 2 months later you get a different perspective when you look back on a project that, you know, after some time has passed. It's really interesting to see it that way. The last thing I did on this day was to make a menu screen and a logo for the game, and I felt like that was a good place to end because we've now got some form of a text logo. We've got a menu screen that is kind of interactive, like it's animated, and that's where I left it for day 3. Day 4 is for me the final day of the jam. With just 17 hours left on the clock, I had only a 6-hour window before I had to leave for work and start my shift. And unfortunately, by the time I got home at 2 AM, there would only be 5 hours left to submit the game. And I knew that, you know, at 2 AM I wasn't going to load my computer up and continue to work on the project. So everything I needed to get done had to be within that first 6 hours. Luckily, I was already in a position where there wasn't much left to do. So today I finished the menus for the game by creating a scene for the end of the game where it gives credits to the assets used, as well as a button that links to my YouTube channel and a return button that takes you back to the title screen of the game. After all of that was done, it was time to package the game, upload it to Itch and submit it to the jam with some artwork for the game. Over the next few days, I was very excited to be playing games by other developers that had entered the jam, and I think there was over 1,100 games in total. I only played about 50 of them myself, but it was very interesting to see how other people had interpreted the theme. And as well as this, I was watching a lot of Inbound Shovel streams when I wasn't obviously at work or playing the games myself, just so I feel like there was a lot of cool stuff and cool interpretations of the just getting started theme. And a few days later, you know, the results were out, and I feel like I did very well to get 497th overall out of, like I said, over 1,100 entries. I'm personally really happy about that because not only is it my first ever game jam, it's also my first ever original game. I feel like I learned a lot from this experience. You know, obviously I delved a little bit into pixel art, having made the moon sprite a couple days earlier. That was my first ever pixel art sprite that I'd made. As well as that, I also learned a little bit about level design and, you know, trying to make levels that worked but were also tied into the mechanics of the game. I feel like that was very, very unique experience for me. And I also got the sense of pride that you got for actually like working to a deadline, getting a game out there on a limited time frame and releasing it. And it was so cool to me watching, you know, all the feedback coming from the game and the comments people were saying. It was so cool to like watch that and have that feedback. I really enjoyed this game jam and I look forward to working on the next one. If you want to play First Steps, you can find a link to the game in the description of this video. Also, come and join me on my game dev journey by subscribing to my YouTube channel. I would really appreciate it. And of course, check out how I put a unique spin on the classic arcade game Pong in this video right here. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video, and comment if you think I should keep working on first steps or if I should move on to the next adventure. I'm very interested in looking to see what you have to say.